primary reason for an ultra-fast SSD is that it gives the game designer freedom.
In March 2020, Sony held a presentation for developers. Not consumers, developers. Mark Cerny, the architect of the PS5, stood in an empty theater and spent 40 minutes talking about a storage drive.
By the way, the feature most requested by the developers, that was an SSD.
Not the games, not the price, a storage drive. That should tell you everything about how seriously Sony believed in what they'd built. PS5's SSD hits 5.5 gigabytes per second of raw throughput, with Sony's custom compression up to 9 gigabytes per second of usable data. The PS4's hard drive, by comparison, under real-world conditions, ran at closer to 50 megabytes per second. So this isn't an upgrade, this is up to 100 times faster. But Cerny wasn't just selling a spec sheet. He was selling a design philosophy. On a slow drive, game worlds are built around the bottleneck. Corridors exist so that the engine has time to load what's ahead. Open worlds have invisible density limits. The streaming geometry costs time the drive doesn't have. Fast travel isn't instant because the destination hasn't loaded yet. When the drive is no longer the bottleneck, all of that goes away. So you don't have to design around the constraints. Tim Sweeney, the CEO of Epic Games, said that the PS5's SSD made it more efficient than most gaming PCs at the time of launch. Insomniac Games received their PS5 development kits earlier than most studios. And rather than use the time to optimize an existing project, they asked a few different questions. They asked what kind of game is only possible because of this hardware. The answer? Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. So they changed the structure. They built levels with more density in every corner, not because they had a bigger budget, but because they weren't rationing geometry against a streaming budget anymore. The SSD would keep up, so they stopped designing with that limitation in mind. Insomniac built their world differently because of the PS5 hardware. The SSD changed how they thought about what a level could contain. The question isn't whether Rift Apart was the perfect showcase. The question is, what would come next? Spider-Man 2 shipped in 2023 from the same studio with a much bigger budget. The SSD made fast travel instant, which is genuinely impressive. But if you pull back and look at the world design, the borough grid, the density, the structure of how Manhattan is built and traversed, it's the same game design as Marvel's Spider-Man from back in 2018. The hardware got 100 times faster, but the design philosophy didn't change to fully utilize it. A little bit later, we have God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, two of Sony's biggest first-party releases of this console generation, both designed to also run on a PlayStation 4 console with a spinning hard drive. And when you build for the slowest common denominator, that device sets the ceiling for everyone. The PS5 SSD in those games is doing one job: loading data faster. What about third-party studios? Before the PS5 even launched, a developer said publicly that third parties had, and I'm going to be precise here, zero chance of utilizing the PS5 SSD as intended because multi-platform pipelines required designing for the lowest common denominator. When your game ships on Xbox, PC, last-gen hardware, you have to architect for the slowest device. PS5 SSD becomes a load screen accelerator, simply a quality of life improvement and not a design philosophy. The technology required studios to build specifically for it. Committing to it meant going PS5 exclusive, and then Sony spent 3 years releasing cross-gen games to protect 117 million PS4 owners. And that was a rational business decision. You don't walk away from 117 million installed units. That money is real. The cost to this generation is also real. Every single cross-gen release was a PS5 native design that never happened. That's an industry that had every financial incentive to move more slowly than the technology did.
I think about this in terms of balancing evolution and revolution. Now, with PlayStation 1, 2, and 3, the target was a revolution each time with a brand new feature set.
Now, I've talked on this channel before about the cell processor in the PS3, an architecture that was so demanding at the time that most studios were not able to fully embrace it. And the ones that did commit to it, Naughty Dog and Guerrilla, made some of the best looking games of that generation. Now, history doesn't perfectly repeat itself, but there are always similarities. PS5 SSD is one of the most impressive pieces of hardware that Sony has shipped. For most of this generation, it's just been used to speed up loading menus. So that's not a hardware failure. It's an industry that had every incentive to move slower than the technology allowed. And we'll be back with more tech and gaming content when there's something else worth saying. With that, I hope to see you in the next one.